Welcome to the Museum of Dead Words. I'm your tour guide, Dyalekt, alongside my colleagues Andrew J. Scoville, Kristen Crouch, and Pamela Capaldi. We spent the past few years scouring the internet to find words that turn conversations into fights. Now, pre-pandemic, we were going around to cafes and schools and other venues that allow us to use their walls. And since the pandemic happened, we realized there's nothing more dangerous than misinformation. So I've quarantined these words in the house with me. I should probably tell you a little bit about the museum. It opened when your mouths did, and thanks to the generous contribution of millions of donors like you, we've been able to identify and catalog a growing list of words that have fallen into disuse. In English, it's kind of hard to tell when a word has stopped working. Being English, these words tend to colonize conversations and then just sort of sit there, festering, letting tone and context do all the work. Sometimes these words die, and it takes generations for anybody to notice. That's dangerous. Words only become weapons when they cease to function as tools, and the sharpness of their wit grows in direct proportion to the dulling of their meaning. Calling someone a hater is as indecipherable as it is incisive. You can often find these words propped up by glossaries or dictionaries. Dictionaries are the worst culprit. They were never meant to hold a word. There's just a snapshot of how one was feeling at the time. We don't know that, and we allow these words, these zombie words, to infect our advice and our arguments. Let's go to the first word. It's an old word. It's been around and been dead longer than most of us have been alive. It's the sin of pretending to a virtue or goodness. It comes from religion, and it's about safety and loyalty. A pretender to the faith could be an infiltrator who could corrupt or endanger the flock. The word hypocrite was created to ensure safety in a community, to reveal the wolf in sheep's clothing. As soon as the wolves could, they started stretching the definition and moving the goalposts. And now all we know is a hypocrite is somebody we can't trust. That is dangerous, because when we don't trust anybody, we don't have community. And that's when the wolves strike. It's this nefarious idea that someone is going to strike us first, so we must hit them. And it's an equivocation for why they will do harm to me. It died in 1639 at the height of the discussion around John Cook's play Greens to Quoquay, which was explained that the accusation of someone being a hypocrite is the same thing as pulling the old "I'm rubber, you're glue" defense, except we're all glue. The real point is change, or lack thereof. In 1740, long after the word died, there was the Plantation Act in America, and South Carolina at the same time made the Negro Act. This act made it illegal for enslaved Africans to move abroad, to assemble in groups, to raise food, to earn money, and learn to write. Also, they made it legal for the owners of these enslaved Africans to kill them. So, in 1741, this is hazily reported, but by all accounts, there was a rebellion between enslaved Africans and poor whites who rebelled against their masters and against their people who hold their indentured servant contracts. And in the aftermath, the establishment came up with this idea that both the enslaved Africans and the poor whites were hypocrites, and their differences would drive them apart. That successful strategy continues to this day. This is how change is stifled. It's why Dr. King was labeled a communist, and why healthcare is called socialist today. It's how they dismissed Occupy Wall Street, and how they are currently gaslighting the people who are buying GameStop stock. If everybody's a hypocrite, nobody is safe, and we don't have any trust. That's how a word dies. We've all been hypocrites before, and we've had valid reasons for it. We were wrong, we were lying, or maybe just tired or hungry. Our moods affect us just as much as our intentions. So how about you? When have you failed to do what you say? How do you rebuild trust? How do you give grace to your fellow hypocrites? Please share that in chat while we rock this track. Hey yo, I'm wrong a lot. It's not a disclaimer, just a warning. We'll be cooking with a different flavor. Cultural callaloo, cultural capital. Stir the cipher, poke the bear, and let the facts resolve. But what about times when everybody agrees? Get gas, doing the dab, pat on the back for the team. It's like an echo chamber. Haters come to bask in the gleam. Got you feeling like you know what a word actually means. Except a solitary sucker, an involuntary other, rather a hipster or a cuts to be for you to just suffer. Don't feed the trolls or advocate for the devil. Don't dare mistake an idealist for a rebel. And so we hold hands, get pious, and start mocking them. Straw man, it's bias, ad hominem. Start doxing them, pick cherries and find lots of them. Pull the mask off their face like Mike Donovan, the hypocrites. The hypocritical, hideous, spit sniveling freaking miscreants. A blithering idiot. Ugliness is only matched by their inconsistentness. How to be so unaware of one's own ignorance. Are you listening? They said a thing and did a different thing. Anybody else find that story less interesting? I want to know why. Were you wrong or was it a lie? Was it because you changed your mind or was it because you got something to hide? I'm a conversation starter, not stopper. I do not get it when the people turn their back upon taking their freaking medicine. Switch positions would never benefit, and yeah, I've been a hypocrite, but I don't think I remember it. So if you've never been wrong before in any way, shape, or form, feel free to ignore. Before the rest of us, there's a lot to explore. Set your watch to, wait, I don't got one no more. It's gonna be okay. A broken clock is right twice a day. By this time tonight, another busted clock will be right? You might not like how I think. You don't get what make it distinct. VCRs that still blink. Why they trying to make us extinct? And that's the price you pay. A broken clock is right twice a day. By this time tonight, another stupid jerk will be right. I do the same thing, expect a different message. Don't make me crazy, that's a scientific method. It's gonna be okay. A broken clock is right twice a day. Gamer gators and paper saviors, SJ dubs, amateur debaters, anybody who wants liberty desperately but ain't trying to see it contextually, especially me. Most of us are the hero of our own tale. The road is tough, we face enemies and prevail. The conversation is competition, we don't bother with details. Those are for the jesters that are destined to fail. One thing I love is to fail and look stupid. One thing you love is to watch people fail and look stupid. There's a whole bunch of studies you can look up to prove it. You should thank folks for being brave enough to do it. And I don't mean me in particular or even at all. I'm not here for your boos or applause. I'm just here to write. I don't even know how clocks work, y'all. It's gonna be okay. A broken clock is right twice a day. Now, hypocrite isn't that big of a deal, so we let that one run freely. But the real dangerous words, we keep those locked up in the basement. We use strict guidelines during a year of research to find words that caused fights, that got people triggered. And if you think that triggering isn't a big deal for folks, well, remember what triggers tend to be on the end of. We couldn't use words that worked in different contexts. That's why we couldn't use the word criminal, because it's perfectly fine as an adjective, criminal intent, criminal activity, but it doesn't work at all as a noun. People aren't criminals, that's not even a job. No, but that line of thinking does bring us to our next word, and in many ways it was the first word because I found that we couldn't talk about this word because we didn't share the definition. Now, in the definition where it says fascist, they do mean literally the Nazi kind. Throughout the 30s, news reports and discussions of racism were about what German folks were doing to the Jews, Romani, homosexuals, black folks, and other groups deemed not white enough. On a personal note, that was Daddy. That was my dad. Elbow and stuff over here. That's fine. That was my father. He followed his way to the States from Russia, so I do understand the way that racism has to do with Jewish immigrants, even as Jewish folk debate our relationship with whiteness today. Well, we got to talk about the roots. The word race came about mid-16th century. A group of people, a tribe, a common occupation, even a generation. It had a lot of different definitions. By the 19th century, we had terms like race hatred and race prejudice and negrophobia, which means what it sounds like. The popular term by the 1880s was racialism. By 1920, race was kind of a soft way to say black. The black records or records made by black people were called race records. So race meant black because if you weren't black, then you didn't have to worry about race. Also, today and all throughout history, urban, thug, colored, person of color, African American, America has always danced around the ways that we like to call black people. The first recorded utterance of the word actually is as far back as 1902. This cat, Richard Henry Pratt, he was anti-segregation and against the reservations for Native Americans. He was more into assimilation. While a lot of folks would say the only good Indian is a dead Indian, he said, kill the Indian, save the man. He made them Christian. He made them speak English, give up their cultural traditions in favor of becoming more American. He had children kidnapped, taken away from their families, and brought to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, where they had these indoctrination camps. And funny enough, people still debate whether or not he was racist. I mean, Native people don't. Carlisle, PA. If you're familiar with my work, you would know that my first album play was called Square Peg Syndrome, and it took place there. I was a biracial kid in a town that had riots that dealt with race just about every year. Because I could often pass for white, I would hear a lot of the things that people said to try to tear down this really powerful word, racism. They started adding this modifier, reverse racism. They said that people who oppose racism were the real racists. It was an attempt to muddy the waters. They were even aided by artists. When you think about the ironic dehumanization that was going on with Nazis and with racists in TV and film, they made them evil cartoon characters that you couldn't really relate to. Think about the precision and terror of the Nazis being broken down into the insipid stormtroopers. By the 2000s, we had articles saying that racism was dead. Disney movies about overcoming racism. Even Avenue Q and that nonsense about how everybody's a little bit racist. Like Chris Rock said about AIDS, they never wanted to cure racism. They just wanted to manage the symptoms. By the time we got to Obama, it was all over but the shouting. In 2008, I want to give you a little stats for this. A Gallup poll said only 51% of white Americans thought that racism towards black people was widespread in the US. For comparison, 42% of these white people thought that racism towards white people was widespread. I can't say enough how racist and racism are such good words that call out these terrible inequities. But it scared folk. So they use these cartoons and their projection to create this ridiculous binary. Racism is done by bad people, and I'm not bad people, so I can't be racist. Therefore, you must be the racist. That makes no sense. And that's how a word dies. How about you? Have you seen people abuse the word racism and try to soften its effects? Well, if you have, share it in the chat while I kick a story about that. To make you feel safe, a couple people had to get this place. Right up the block, an unarmed black man got shot. And to keep his job, another brother had to cut off his locks. And you scared I'll force you to be PC? Man, you must be on PCP. Check it out. Slavery never ended. You're sorry I said it. Slavery never ended. The way they did it was just getting expensive. And just like there ain't never been a president that was a leftist, a plantation ain't a bed and breakfast. It was too late for them to undo their message, and they were scared of retribution if they wasn't protected. So the 13th Amendment had a clever exception. If convicted of a crime, you could still be indentured. To clear up any ambiguity about a government, slavery is still a very legal form of punishment. Available jobs range from prisoner to soldier. Every potential looter was shipped to Angola, chained to the gang or starstruck for fame. Shinier shackles when it's by another name. The old slave codes change clothes to James Crow. If you're like me and your brain, so they target the same folk. That game though, then politicians got lines. You better be tough on crime, got your best interest in mind. If you're innocent, you'll be fine if you got nothing to hide. Never mind the stuff like vagrancy was daily defined. Freedom confined? That's freedom on the vine. It's only worth it if it ends up in the wine. I don't know much, but I know one thing. You gotta preach to the choir so they know what to sing. I don't know much, but I know one thing. You gotta preach to the choir so they know what to sing. I don't know much, but I know one thing. You gotta preach to the choir so they know what to sing. I don't know much, but I know one thing. You gotta preach to the choir. Thugs in the house, they at war with you. Ladies in the house, they at war with you. Everybody on the left, they at war with you. Everybody on the right, they at war with you. You got $1 in your pocket, they at war with you. You got $10 in your pocket, they at war with you. If you got $100, they at war with you. If you got $1 million, you'll be fine, it's cool. To add injury to insult, criminalize a race, check the result. Arrest one, assume we all at fault. We all in the same gang, we ain't in the same cult. The thing about black codes and pig laws, sidebar, that's why cops are what a pig's called, is they were regulated by the same states that just lost and were trying to recover and recoup costs. In other words, the South got what they wanted from the war, and most of their dead soldiers were poor. Just like how a CEO will burn a business to the floor and get enough sympathy to win awards. Or even liberals act like we're inherently criminal, screaming black on black like the rhetoric is literal. The residual effect of that yoke up on our neck. We internalize this negative, repetitive mess. Let's be clear. Most crime is intra-racial. 90% amongst black folks, and I know that sounds painful, but we've been ghettoized. That's why the number is fairly high. White on white crime is closer to 85. Anybody know why that ain't been stigmatized? No think pieces out there to criticize? No, we gotta do better, it's epidemic in size. Cause that's privilege when you can just let it slide. I don't know much, but I know one thing. You gotta preach to the choir so they know what to sing. You may be wondering why I'm rapping. See, language comes from sound, and communication comes from the drum. So we use rhythm and tone to keep these words in check. The reality is that words don't actually mean anything until we give them power by infusing them with tone and cadence. Our next word, miscegenation, first appeared in Miscegenation, the Theory of Blending of the Races, applied to the white man and the Negro. It's by New York World managing editor. I'm not even going to say the name of these cats, because screw these guys. You see, it was a hoax that was perpetuated by the New York World staff. It was part of an anti-Lincoln campaign for the 1864 presidential election. It's a literary forgery. It was intended to argue against racial equity, but it was using sarcasm. It was blaming the Lincoln administration for catering a little bit too much to black people. And the authors, they unsuccessfully tried to trick Lincoln into endorsing the work. There also had a miscegenation ball with interracial dancing alleged to be held at a Republican function in New York City during the campaign. Think of these guys as like a classier Breitbart. Satire and sarcasm don't really work unless your sole goal is to troll. And the trolling worked. P.T. Barnum himself gave them props for how they turned an absurdity into common sense. It's kind of like how pick yourself up by your bootstraps used to mean attempting the impossible. The real-world effects included the 1924 Immigration Act, which placed severe limits on immigration from countries deemed non-white. The next year, in 1925, Hitler blamed the Jews for bringing Africans to mate with white Germans. They called us the Rhineland bastards. In 1967, Loving versus Virginia, it was a Supreme Court case that struck down the state laws banning interracial marriage. The plaintiffs were Richard and Mildred Loving, a white man and a black woman whose marriage was deemed illegal according to Virginia state law. It's interesting that once a white guy complained about it, then we got it turned over. But it's nice to know that sometimes that's how a word dies. The word petered out for a while until it found a friend. White genocide, which was coined in the 70s and grew in power during the 90s. The American Tea Party in the 2010s, they took our jobs, the birther movement about Obama, that whole double whammy of the immigrant family and the black man taking away their white women. There were these false stories about rampant murders of white people in South Africa. This white nationalist, Robert Whitaker, he coined this phrase. Anti-racist is a code word for anti-white. You see how the last word in the museum ties into this. They worked themselves into such a frenzy that they believe that multiculturalism, environmentalism, feminism, atheism, the LGBTQ community, and abortion, and all of these things all have the same goal. White genocide. So how do you feel about it? What do they call mixed people where you're from? Do mixed race kids and couples get the side eye? Do people think that it's white genocide? So what I decided to do, people talking about this white genocide, it's literally my parents, so I wrote a song about my parents doing it. I hope you like it. Love conquers all can be a terrible phrase. Mommy-lect and daddy-lect, they fell in love in that way, cause when they met and they had sex, you couldn't have been prepared for what came next. White people in Philly disappeared from the map. Every time they knocked boots, they were gone in a snap. Mike Schmidt, whoever should have been the 80s quarterback. I probably should mention that Mama-lect is black. Daddy was an immigrant, but he was a Jew. He's an example of the American dream come true. He left Russia because they said he wasn't white enough for them. In America, we don't care unless you're Muslim or African. The first lesson, when you join the white party, you can be vegan. But don't you have a fever for dark meat? Because every time they showed each other their bare parts, well, look what happened to Amelia Earhart. It's called miscegenation. And it plagues every nation. The unfortunate side effects of colonization. People of color are sexy. And the food is spicy. Just don't dare try to make one your wife because hi, I'm the one that ruined your life. I'm that Jew in disguise, that big black dude in your wife. Hi, I'm the one that you in a fight. Hi, I'm the one that ruined your life. I'm that Jew in disguise, that big black dude in your wife. Hi, I'm the one that you in a fight. The Bible says to go forth and multiply. But when you pander to the left, all you do is divide. Left-handed cigarettes shake the left-hand black guy. Would you rather have diversity or pumpkin spice? Trade those DSLs for PSLs. Allow you to indulge in your secret self. 1 + 3/5 divided by 2. And you wonder why your parents think less of you. See me? I'm like Carrie without the pig blood. And everything I touch turns white stuff to dust. I made rap pop, I got rid of the ska bands. Now even the president on Broadway is a black man. Now everybody on Broadway is a black man. Now every president ever is a black man. Now every superhero ever is a black man. Now everybody you love is a black man. Damn. Hi, I'm the one that ruined your life. I'm that Jew in disguise, that big black dude in your wife. Hi, I'm the one that you wanna fight. Hi, I'm the one that ruined your life. I'm that Jew in disguise, that big black dude in your wife. Hi, I'm the one that you wanna fight. You know, it's math. There's only so much life, and God promised it to those who are white. I mean, tend your flock and maybe bang a sheep with me, but don't do nothing that would mess with the obsequiosity like equality. It's the fall of humanity. How's the white dude supposed to feed his family? No more coffee or curling or Tom Cruise running. No more blocks for turning or indoor plumbing or tanning or plumbing. Were you thinking plumbing? Collards instead of kale. It's also mind-numbing. A kaleidoscope of colors in the street to see. I bet you don't even know how you're supposed to speak to me. There's a code you gotta know so you don't get fleeced. What up, here come the PC police. Now you got a shirt that says I can't breathe. This is America, you could love it or leave. Hi, I'm the one that ruined your life. I'm that Jew in disguise, that big black dude in your wife. Hi, I'm the one that you wanna fight. I'd like to apologize to people who are expecting to see the word literally in the museum. Unfortunately for you, literally has also meant figuratively for almost the entirety of its existence. Words tend to be flexible like that. That doesn't mean that it's broken. Similarly, the word they can also be used as a singular and has been for a really long time. Now, our next word is about the status quo. Normal. You see, before the 19th century, normal wasn't used to describe people. Normal comes from math, referring to a perpendicular right angle. Academic disciplines of comparative anatomy and physiology, they started describing the normal state. That meant when organs in bodies were functioning as intended, in their ideal state, their best state. This best state was also described as natural, and that's how we judged an organ as healthy. There was a popular statistical thinker in the 1830s. Stats were actually a hot thing at the time, and a lot of slang was derived from statistics. This guy, Adolf Dyalekt, and he put forth the idea of the average man. The average man was someone who had the typical height, weight, eye color, intelligence, morality. It was a model for society. Of course, you can assume that the average man was white as well. Dyalekt really believed that the average man was perfect and beautiful. That the average man was more Homer than Homer Simpson. Not average as in typical, but a model human being that should guide society. See, this is how A's in school became the expectation. Normal is not meant to be doable. Also, yes. Like we said, it often deals with both white supremacy and patriarchy because normal was never applied to the woman. Emil Durkheim, a 19th century philosopher, is one of the people responsible for establishing sociology as a science, was talking about criminals. And at the time, a lot of criminologists, they regarded criminality as a hereditary pathological state. Durkheim disagreed. Durkheim said that crime is normal, natural, and inevitable part of society, so it must perform a positive function. The abnormal, then, was a necessary counterpart to the normal, which facilitated change and social progress. Nobody hates change and social progress more than the normal. You see, that wasn't the popular or normal conclusion. It meant heterosexual by 1914. It was reinforced as white, Christian, and Protestant specifically, and really held sway over most of America until the uprisings of the 1960s, where the abnormal got tired of being abused and excluded. Normal really means exclusion. The kids who grew up in the 60s finally killed the beast in the 80s. The nerds, the freaks, the geeks, the punks, the hip hoppers, and yes, people of color and LGBTQ people were all over televisions. They were in books, in every place where people were influenced. It became cool once again to stand out. Normal means inevitable, natural, common, ordinary, typical, straight, white, perfect, exclusion, and ideal. This is how a word dies. How about you? When have folks given you unrealistic standards or used normal as a knife to cut you out? share that in chat and I'm gonna jam a little bit again. It's alright if it's alright. It's alright if it's alright. It's alright if it's alright. And you can keep this up all night. This one's for the players, hustlers, gamers, buskers, scribers, 9-to-5ers, strugglers, teachers who make sure they know they reaches. Revolutionary storming the breaches. The dreamers, the liars, even the reality deniers who refuse to see the galaxy through blinders. The freestylers and the kids giving out flyers. The Gene Wilders and the Richards without priors. The inspired, even when I could just be a case of writer's block. By the end of the day, rest in peace, Fife Dog. It's the same song. We end up lost. The sister figure, mausoleum of default. Compromise and stay strong. Rob Peter to pay Paul. The hood singing, that's slipping Jimmy, it ain't Saul. Hollywood singing, capture the image and make sure the truth isn't stranger than fiction. It's just dull. Welcome to mediocrity. We're the only thing that's on flicks the ennui. Mediocrity. Welcome to mediocrity. There won't be a lot to say. The artifice is Artemis's bow. The artificial goal. The artist makes the art invisible. Flood the market, miss the mark instead of targeting control misconstrued. It's the blues without soul. It's having African dreams and not remembering everything. We came from farmers too, not just queens and kings. And if everybody a king, is anybody a king? Then I don't want to be a king. That's a European thing. I done had it with swords in a stone, swords on a throne. How about somebody pull these swords out of my auto loans? Subprime sequels, Monopoly prequels. Can anybody else tell the whole plot from the preview? Reboots, the reshoots, jury the rig. Common Core, the kids, and the juries are rigged. Those who should create instead of working to live. Anybody surprised? Ain't nobody trying to risk? Welcome to mediocrity. We're the only thing that's on flicks, the ennui. Mediocrity. Welcome to mediocrity. I say let them have it, the store and the corporation that own it. Let them have appropriation while they're xenophobic. Wear them patterns, yeah, they imitations. Not that it's insulting, you make it look bad, should I hire us for consulting? Certified origination, yeah, you can't teach that. Like y'all use imagination with Schrodinger's cat. It's dead, the script is ruined, and you can't turn back. Now there's a giant mechanical spider in the third act. Middle management, middle messes and misses the point again. Can't see the laser swords before the midichlorians. Remember, berries are better than new stories before you spoil them, and that's what'll be reported by historians. New era, no error, it's like whatever you do, the mold's already there for you to settle into. So whatever you do, go and push the edge of the roof, cause when you push the edge, the center moves too. I mean, literally. Don't take me literally. People hate feelings because we were taught to think critically. Feeling me? Let's start a city where skill tops marketability, where fame is different from infamy, where the poor are used for more than artillery or infantry, and most importantly, this next word, some have said that it's derivative. And to be honest, this word does have its roots in the word racism. But our next word, sexism, was born of the affected party rather than the oppressor. So that changes a little bit of the trajectory. That's the word, trajectory. Even in the Museum of Dead Words, sometimes we lose our ability to say them. It changes the trajectory of this word's life. You see, this word specifically was coined by Pauline Leet, the director of special programs at Franklin and Marshall College, during a student-faculty forum. It was part of the women's lib movement of the 1960s. This is also called second-wave feminism. It was really popularized by Carolyn Bird in her essay, The Introduction to On Being Born Female. See me, I'm sliding over, I'm looking over here at a laptop. This is my DJ here, playing my beats and having the quotes so I can get them right. Carolyn said, "Sexism is intended to rhyme with racism. Both are used to keep the powers that be in power." Ever heard of curvature? Maybe curving. You see, it's an old legal doctrine whereby upon marriage, a woman's legal rights are subsumed by her husband. Basically, an unmarried woman would have the right to property and make contracts in her name. But once you got married, that was transferred over to your husband because of a legal fiction where men and women are one, and therefore men get to make the decisions. So, in the otherwise inauspicious year of 1776, A young lady named Abigail Adams saw an opportunity in the natural rights and wrote to her husband and said, read the quote again here, "In the new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire that you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of husbands. Remember that all men would be tyrants if they could." Hashtag not all men. She wasn't writing about women's rights or even about the right to vote. She was just asking for relief from coverture. Her husband, John Adams, replied, "I cannot but laugh." Sexism died in the 2010s with the advent of the two-way street of sexism. This wasn't a new attack, but it's a coordinated one. Sexism, like racism, implies that someone is a bad person, and it's sidestepped by hypotheticals and straw man and headcanon. You see, headcanon is a beautiful thing if you're changing the ending of that favorite show of yours that got canceled too quickly. But, in fact, let's get back to Carolyn Bird's essay. Women who get good jobs do it by outsexing the sexism. They persuade the boss that a woman's intuition is needed, or that women pay more attention to detail. They know it isn't so, but they use sexist arguments to get around prejudice. When we can accept oppression in our lexicon, we can't get free. We just get a better view of the cage. That's how a word dies. Sexism is a one-way street. If we want to remove sexism, we need to get equal pay in all situations, even in areas where women traditionally make more. If we get rid of sexism, you know what we can also do? We can remove pressure from men to be breadwinners, to be strong, to be emotionless. We can remove the stigma that only women get sole custody of children. We can have more male teachers. You know, only 2% of this country's teachers are black men. We could have women in combat, not to take away, but to support. We could remove the stigma that when men get assaulted, it's because they're weak. We can change the standards of beauty and handsomeness and understand that, yes, making fun of penis size is a part of body dysmorphia. We can change the dumb husband stereotypes that you see in sitcoms. Have harsher criminal sentences for men abolished as well. All of these things, if we can remove the oppression that is the one-way street between men and women. So what do you think? What are the ways in which sexism hurts us all by exerting power over women? While y'all share that in the chat, I'm going to run this track. It's called Headcan. And it's about the thoughts in my head that made me feel safer so I could be myself. That's positive headcanon. When the thoughts in your head make it impossible for other people to be themselves, well, that's when those headcanons are dangerous. Check it out. I got a headcanon. You got a headcanon? It's like everything I see up in my head happens. I get everything I needed from my headcanon. If you trying to get free, let's bust these headcanons. I got a headcanon. You got a headcanon? It's like everything I see up in my head happens. I get everything I needed from my headcanon. If you trying to get free, let's bust these headcanons. Load 'em up, load 'em up, load 'em up, yeah. Load 'em up, load 'em up. Spider-Man was black and so was Optimus Prime. And Jazz and Panthro, man, a lot of those guys, they weren't. Not really, except in my mind. Saturday morning wasn't really diversified. But I was first in line for media that was deep enough. My immediate dream was for a daydream to keep me up, so thoughts don't lead me astray. Stray thoughts ricochet like bullets in my brain. The bulletin board smashed to bits, purposeful and passionless, full of discord and taxing ingenuity and my craftiness. What did I do after this but find a massive pits and hide behind the guys who let me shine just like an asterisk or a star? Sometimes I get caught up in my sentences, head trips and stumble through confusion and relentlessness. A boring ball of hell which catchphrases as chemtrails, so I let off when the melon starts to swell. I got a headcanon. You got a headcanon? It's like everything I see up in my head happens. I get everything I needed from my headcanon. If you trying to get free, let's bust these headcanons. I got a headcanon. You got a headcanon? It's like everything I see up in my head happens. I get everything I needed from my headcanon. If you trying to get free, let's bust these headcanons. What's mine is mine. What's mine is mine. What's mine is mine, what's mine is mine. I'm really only here to reshape and refine. Memory is a lie like a Lucifer scheme. Life is a lucid dream. And what I mean is we make up most of it, whether we think we do or not. So why not make a change that has an effect on the plot? Making the cartoons black made me feel my family was there, or it could be if I called. See, it was mainly self-care. The headcanon blasts and it obliviates reality that could possibly get in the way, like a favorite artist and they made an album you hate. Not anymore, anything could be erased. or make that, anything can be explained. Make your brain dance like the tumblerina ballet. You know you mean, sip your tea, follow rabbits down holes till you figure out that you never had control. I got a head cannon. You got a head cannon? It's like everything I see up in my head happens. I get everything I needed from my head cannon. If you try and take it free, let's bust these head cannons. I got a head cannon. You got a head cannon? It's like everything I see up in my head happens. I got everything I needed from my head cannon. If you try and take it free, let's bust these head cannons. A lot of these words started to fall off and begin to die when they had too many meanings and we couldn't share the meanings. This one is a little bit of the opposite. The next word, slut, initially had so many different meanings and none of them were related to sex or even women. It was first found in print in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. The line was, thy lord is so sluttish, or why is thy lord so sluttish, something like that. They didn't mean a deity. They were talking about a noble person or a rich cat. And it dealt with men who were dirty. And I understand how dirty has an association with loose morals. Dirty means untidy. Everything's not in their place, so you can't trust them, right? It's not healthy. It's because people like symmetry. This is one of the things about everything. One of the reasons why TV news anchors are beautiful people and why actors and everything, and people prefer to hang out with pretty people even if they're not dating them, is because symmetry means we can trust it. That's why we like a 4/4 beat with some rhythm, because it gives us something that we can set up and get. The word also used to mean rags dipped in wax to use in place of candles. That was in England and Ireland. It's also meant female dog, an ill-shaped fellow, a shambling fellow. During all this time, it's been grammatically correct to refer to a man or a woman as a slut, although it was already heading towards the direction of being more like women. By the 20th century, it meant a woman of loose morals, or more specifically, a woman with the morals of a man. Thank you, Steve Harvey. There are slutty maid costumes, slutty nurses, slutty babysitters. What are the other professions? There's the waitresses, the secretaries, a lot of service professions. It comes from the idea that a woman only gets a job to be closer to men, which is funny because there is a service job about being closer to people of, well, I guess of any sex. It's prostitution, right? But there's a distinction between what is defined as a hoe and what is defined as a slut. You see, a slut is someone who did it for free and liked that. That's not normal. That's a perversion. A slut is a bad person because they can't control their primal urges. I won't respect somebody who don't respect themselves. She was asking for it. She made me do it. The picture slut paints is of a woman who is confusing, who is emotional, a dirty woman who is poor, desperate, crazy, dangerous, ugly, undesirable, untrustworthy, promiscuous, self-important, showing skin, implied consent. See, in 2011, there was the Slut Walk. It was an international attempt to take back the word. And I would happen to walk by the New York one. I ran into a friend of mine who was performing some poems. And we went inside and checked it out. It was really a beautiful scene where people of all backgrounds were supporting women and their ability to exist and be themselves. It was in Union Square. And if you've seen Union Square, you know that there's this big middle area and then there's room to stand around on the outside. And the outside was surrounded by a gelatinous ring of creepy dudes who didn't care about any types of meanings, thoughts, or feelings, or self-efficacy that any of the people inside had. All they saw were sluts, and therefore they could do what they want. It's also how a word dies. Hey, so how about you? When have you seen the word slut be used to take away credibility from women and demean them? This next song is about dehumanization, and there's going to be a lot of dehumanizing going on. It's about the ways that we hold ourselves down, are held down, and are all a part of this terrible system of the Struggle Olympics. It goes like this. We keep struggling. Need, we need love again. We keep struggling, we keep struggling. Me, what's up with them? We keep struggling. Need, we need love again. We keep struggling, we keep struggling. Me? It's the 50th anniversary of the Struggle Olympics, the usual competition with a subtle difference. Usually, the golden crab is awarded to the winner with enough crude oil to keep you warm in the winter. The crab is still in there, but thanks to our new sponsor, you get a year of resources for every interest group in Congress. So thanks to Middleman Management, LLC, for being kind enough to provide all of this here for free. Fine print. It's free in the sense there's no fee directly, but they will need recompense. A slight convenience tax will be applied to both sides, and a convenience charge when they arrive. And speaking of arrivals, let's introduce the rivals. The blacks, the poor, the gay, the Latino, the bi, non-bi, indigenous, and intersection, and everyone who's been shunned on the internet. Keep struggling. Need, we need love again. We keep struggling, we keep struggling. Me, what's up with them? We keep struggling. Need, we need love again. We keep struggling, we keep struggling. Me? The non-binaries have already been mathematically eliminated. Is that ironic? And the competition will be invigorated. Black Lives Matter won the Image Award as well as the coveted Copycat Image Award. The spokesman for the blacks had this to say: "We sacrificed a lot for this, and thanks for the praise. It's the new Black Pride. Soon it will be co-opted by gays. In the Struggle Olympics, we award points for throwing shade. And who throws shade better than the ladies? Who would dare to compare wage slavery to making babies? They thought they ran away with the race again, and so they lost by the skin of a safety pin." Intersections the point of the opening performance by Planned Parenthood about eugenics and abortion. Hologram Margaret Sanger was greeted with boos, said, "Whose right is it to choose when you got so much to lose?" We keep struggling. Need, we need love again. We keep struggling, we keep struggling. Me, what's up with them? We keep struggling. Need, we need love again. We keep struggling, we keep struggling. Intense. This is how we hope that it might go down. Let's get ourselves prepared for the final round. Rape culture was swatted down by religious persecution. The non-Christian representative was abusive. This is a great day for us to gain justice. Religions don't hate women. Men are just dicks. Next up, let's line up for some profiling. The black rep increased the degree of difficulty by smiling. And he's passed over. What an amazing play. No reaction for the Muslim rep or even the gay. First place goes to a woman who's trans. I guess there's no romance without seeing what's in your pants. Last event, whose situation is more tragic? They did it. Poor is the largest demographic. In fact, every competitor here was on their track. They got here by not having each other's back. The creator of the Struggle Olympics must have been a sadistic monster like Mojo or Arcade. Let's go to the next word. Things get a little more dangerous as we go from here on out. The next word in our museum is evil. It may be a little bit older than described. The first time it was found in written form was the plural evil in Beowulf, which may be as early as the 700s. According to the Dictionary of Word Origins by John Ato, the meaning of evil has changed so much over the last few hundred years. The last couple hundred years have been really important in the word. It seems that theologians have had considerable influence over it. It takes three possible forms. The personal, moral evil commonly associated with the word, the natural evil, the natural disasters or acts of God, and the metaphysical evil, the spiritual force that may guide us. See, evil is sometimes also perceived as the dualistic, antagonistic, binary advocacy, the devil, the opposite to good. You see, the trouble with the binary is when we start applying these moral judgments to people, they no longer really apply to the thing that they're trying to address. Like racism. When racism is about intent, it ignores the actual outcomes. This is why we see those shows like Mad Men, Breaking Bad, the aforementioned BoJack, where folks are trying to feel good about themselves. If evil is the absence of good, the binary mistakenly implies that good is the absence of evil. Carl Jung, in his Answer to Job and elsewhere, depicted evil as the dark side of God. People tend to believe that evil is external to them because they project their shadow onto others. He interpreted the story of Jesus as an account of God looking at his shadow. It's funny that evil is conflated with darkness. Again, racism. African children are said to be children of Ham. There's no actual connection between evil, which comes from Germanic sources, and Eve, which comes from Hebrew. There also isn't any connection between evil and devil either. That comes from Greek dia and another word, I think, biolin, or something that makes the blios. It just has an orthographic resemblance. The real stuff is in the words that are similar in intent, like villain. You know where the word villain comes from? Villain is a old middle medieval English term that meant farmhand, poor person. The implication is that the poor person is lazy, and thus a lazy person is dangerous because they will take from you. See, if people are evil, they're unlike us. They lack the recognizable good that we have in us. If they are evil, the devil, antagonist, adversary, they won't do what you want. If they don't do what you want, you can stop them. You can imprison them. You can hurt them. You can kill them. I mean, it's even why you see people who are against mass incarceration will make prison rape jokes about people they don't like. There was a book in 2002, Evil in Modern Thought by Susan Neiman. She talked about this earthquake in 1755 that destroyed a big city in Europe, Lisbon. And in the era before the disaster, they talked about those three different levels of evil. And natural was a really big one. But the destruction was so wild and vast and senseless that it eroded people's belief in the idea that there could be an ordered evil. Reality shook their faith in evil. That's how a word dies. I'll get more into it in the song. I'm going to run the track here. But how do you feel about that? Has the concept of evil ever allowed you to rationalize doing harm to others? Whether you did it, or whether you allowed somebody else to do it, or whether you stood by while it happened? How has fealty to evil affected your life? Check it out. Magneto was right! And Bobby Heenan was right! Magneto was right. It was never about a gene or an X. The factors in the way that we were bred. You wanted us to labor at length our evolution, prioritize strength. We absorb the sunlight too, like Superman, but we don't look none like you. Our boys are grown-ass beasts. That's what you call your friends on your feed. It's like you'll hate and fear us forever. According to the professor, we're supposed to be your protectors. Non-violent approach. We die, then you quote what our life isn't worth. It's an extinction agenda. Genosha apartheid don't get no better. Send sentinels to solve the problem. It's like peace was never an option. Magneto was right. And Bobby Heenan was right. And Magneto was right. Silly humanoids. Bobby Heenan was right. Yo. And Bobby Heenan was right. It's like pain was his art and his easel. He was the brain, but we called him the weasel. Few of us respected the brilliance or how it would protect us from villains. Train, say your prayers, eat your vitamins. The brain is gonna catch him in a lie again. Apologize and say it's an embarrassment. I guess it's how you beat a real American. One punch with Tatanka almost got him. Anachronism hit him with a standing rock bottom. The champ rose, hit the ropes on the post. Big bootleg drop, strike pose, grab the fire hose. Brain was the one who knew it was wrong. Had the brains to ask whose side he was on. The champ apologized and tried to make things right. But when you're NWO, that's for life. Magneto was right. And Bobby Heenan was right. Listen to them flat scans. Magneto was right. And Bobby Heenan was right. Magneto was right. Hate the player and the game and the system, but don't hate the folks that have to go and live within them. Never hate a song or a story or a movie, just pay attention to who's producing. If it's The Lion King, man, I'm rolling with Scar. Why it seems like all your enemies disabled and dark? Still trying to get that hometown pop, make me feel like a foreigner on my own block. Even still, real recognize real and know the difference between being inspired and steel. Between Gaga and Madonna. Well, most folks still treat you like Cassandra. Predictability is inability. You're wondering why they're killing the poor folks in the Philippines? Didn't we have a war on drugs at a time? What's that line about history repeating in rhyme? Yeah, by the way, we're a little bit more illuminated now because we dispelled the curse or the evil. Funny aside with our next word, deserve. It's related to, and this isn't just an orthographic thing, just desserts, not desserts like you got a delicious cold or sugary thing, but that you got the thing that you deserve. They do have something to do with each other. It's also a little bit related to the idea of worth one's salt, which actually, a funny thing about that, I haven't talked too much about how much these words relate to commerce. But when we talk about racism, chattel slavery, sexism, wages, all of those things, money is always wrapped up in there. The actual word salary comes from the Latin salarium, which has to do with soldiers getting an allowance to buy salt. Deserve is a flexible word that gives both praise and disdain. And that's why it really took root. You didn't study for the test, so you got bad grades. You deserve those bad grades. But it would be odd to say that you earned them, because earned connotates effort. Deserve is passive. Deserve is about who you are, not quantifiably, but who you are on the inside. That stuff that's used to rationalize and excuse actions like hurting people who are evil. It's why folks ask if they're a good person. Deep down inside, it seeks to answer, why do things happen? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do good things happen to bad people? The old thinking was that it was some kind of God. And nowadays, our art and media helps perpetuate that. One place where deserve is really real is in horror movies. There's this great piece, Trope Anatomy 101, by Carly St. George, who talks about the final girl. That's the one who survives in the horror movie. They're not like most girls. They're smart. They're resourceful. They're an outsider, but not really an outsider. They maintain the status quo. They're not that much of a weirdo. The ones who die are the slut, the actual outsider, the best friend, and the person of color. In the U.S. alone, we've heard people say that Native Americans don't deserve sympathy because they're savages, and that's why it's okay for them to be separated from their families and forced into indoctrination camps. When people were put into camps over the past few years for immigrating to the country without having a visa, the prevailing wisdom was also they deserved what they got. Black people, I was saying before, the curse of Ham, or also being said that they're too savage or too stupid. You see this with athletes and actors. They didn't get the thing they wanted. They just didn't want it enough. Just like with evil, it's too much for folks to comprehend that bad things can happen to you even if you follow the rules. If people get hip to that, then maybe they'd stop following rules. People fear anarchy more than they fear tyranny. 3 hots and a cot and all that. It died in the 1800s under scrutiny. John Stuart Mill talking about utilitarianism, asking if justice is natural or if justice is headcanon. So we end up getting what we deserve, and we don't advocate for more. We don't protest. We don't fight. We also don't let go or give up or share, because then if we did, we would deserve the failure we get. You only get this coming from a binary, zero-sum, competitive world that envisions an evil adversary to overcome at every corner. You deserve the bad things that happen to you, the sadness, the pain, the disease, the poverty. It's all your fault because of your past actions, your current actions, or your qualities. Just, I don't like your face. You deserve the good things that happen to you, the riches, the fame, the desirability, the power. No matter how you get them, the ends justify the means, even if the means don't mean a thing. That is how a word dies. What about you? What about your ability to advocate for yourself and get what you really want? I got a song here that's a little bit of a social experiment about someone who got a lot. Did they deserve it? Let's find out. He woke up early, 6:30, wiped the sleep from his eyes, washed his face and also washed away the dreams from his mind. Last night he was a basketball star, a shooting guard, no one could stop him when he got the rock to move like a hawk. He erased his thought quickly, even though it felt good. Dreams like that are cool for some kids, but not for Elwood. You see, Elwood was born with a congenital heart defect, at least that's what they called it. To him it meant he was a reject. The doctor said he probably wouldn't live past 18. Elwood didn't know that. His birthday was the same week. He wondered why his mama cried and why she hugged him so much as he sat in the cafeteria hardly touching his lunch. He was nervous. More nervous than he thought he should be. After class, he had tryouts for the varsity team. He had to make it, not for the fame or for the stature, but because it made him smile. And to Elwood, that's what matters. The brightest stars, they burn out too soon. And sometimes time can't heal your wounds. Whenever you think you can't make it through, remember you choose whether you win or lose. The brightest stars, they burn out too soon. And sometimes time can't heal your wounds. Whenever you think you can't make it through, remember you choose. By the grace of God, Elwood made the squad. The only problem was now he had to go and face his mom. She was overprotective. And it hurt him to upset her, but he'd rather die than not play basketball, and that's what he said to her. She lost it, flipped out for what seemed like an hour, but apparently it worked, because in the end, he was allowed. She couldn't treat him like a porcelain doll. Not today. His determination and confidence, it made her feel brave. The season was going great. Elwood started at guard. Ironically, the coach praised him the most about his heart. He had trouble breathing and felt tired before the game, but pro scouts were going to be in the crowd. He had to play. Fourth quarter, score tied. Elwood drives baseline, gets fouled, gets knocked down, but doesn't get up this time. The room falls silent. Mom rushes to his side while the team whispers, "You think he's alive?" Elwood's dreaming again, this time about life. He could pass into oblivion or get up and fight. The first choice would be easy, but for reasons only he knows, Elwood opened his eyes, got up and shot some free throws. The brightest stars, they burn out too soon. And sometimes time can't heal your wounds. Whenever you think you can't make it through, remember you choose. The brightest stars, they burn out too soon. Sometimes time can't heal your wounds. Whenever you think you can't make it through, remember you choose. Check it out. Elwood died at 35 after 8 years in the league. He was an all-star 6 times and once an MVP. He had a wife, a daughter, and a son that bore his name. They graduated the same year he made the Hall of Fame. There was a funeral, of course, with thousands in attendance. Everyone whose life was touched by Elwood paid remembrance. Mom was there too, but had no more tears to give. Her son had learned not how to survive, but to live. Out of the dark and into the light of day, where everything is clear and everything makes sense. But you know, what is clear to you may not always be clear to me. It's always been a matter of perspective. That's why the guardian of our last couple of words is obvious. It's interesting because obvious seems like the type of word that wouldn't end up in this museum. And the funny thing is, it's not about the word itself. It's about our usage of the word and our assumptions. Assumptions are a great way to bump your head against things and learn something. But oftentimes they leave us uncurious. And then we can't get anything done. Rather than go through the history of the word, I want to give you a little bit of experiment. In Namibia, there is a tribe called the Himba. And the Himba, in their language, they have no word for blue. And they actually don't have a distinction between blue and green. So they did a little bit of an experiment because folks were curious that maybe we didn't have a word for blue or even see blue until recently. Let's pull up this test. Can we see it? So they had a circle made out of 12 squares. 11 of them were green and 1 was obviously blue. When they asked folks to look at it, people from the Himba tribe had trouble discerning which one it is. Can you see? Is it easy? Is it obvious to you? Cool. But also, interestingly enough, the Himba have a lot of words for green. So they reversed the experiment and they showed English speakers the same circle with 11 squares of one shade of green and 1 odd square of a different shade. Can we check that out? Can you see it? Can you tell which one? Give you a couple of seconds. All right, let's check out the answer key. Did you get it right? Did you see which one it is? You know, funny enough, prior to 1868, there were no homosexuals. Did you know that? Actually, there were no heterosexuals either. We didn't have a word for it. The heterosexual acts and homosexual acts existed. Some were praised, some were disdained, some were banned. But the idea of identifying someone with their sexuality, that didn't really exist. They actually had 4 things. It was heterosexual, homosexual, monosexual, you know. And the other one that we're not going to get into because it's a little nastier than we would like to talk about on this fine day. But the interesting thing about all of this is how when we are satisfied, when we're not curious, we stop talking. And more importantly, we stop listening. That, explicitly, is how words died. So, I gotta ask you, how about you? How do you feel? Can you please share something that once felt obvious, but doesn't feel obvious anymore? Drop that in the chat. Drop another track. This is called Rocket Surgery. Check it out. I got a cure for the conspiracy theorists, and when you hear it, it's gonna separate your soul from your spirit. It's cause the world mostly revolve around patterns, taking the fragment of distraction and you match them. It's not the man, it's not the fault of the devil, we tend to fall for it when it all connects to make us feel special. Your name ain't Katniss and your mama's not Martha, so you're not the one, you're probably just a part of the genre. We all shade from the same symmetry. If it sounds right, you gon' ride that wave, pretty thing. You gon' call me out my name like we still slaves in the field. Is empathy the enemy of keeping it real? If everything is a lie, we do anything to survive. Don't let them threaten the tribe and everybody's denied. That's where the patterns get in front of your eyes, and we don't know how not to be right.
It ain't gotta be rocket surgery.
There's no such thing as rocket surgery, so portmanteau of terms.
It ain't all that deep.
Kind of an idiom. I'm not calling you an idiom.
What you say to me?
One thing that folks ain't know. Figure it out.
Rocket surgery.
Uncle Tom was not an Uncle Tom. Don't let them thoughts hit you with the buckle bomb. Nobody reads, nobody used to read. It's not these millennials with tablets and TVs. See, in the book, Tom was strong, smart, and brave, but white folks ain't want his qualities in their slaves, so they recreated the Tom they wanted up in a play. It'll be years before black folks could read anyway with those minstrel shows, jump Jim Crows, turn Tom to that self-hating slur. You know, speaking of shows, you know, I was raised on those. Mom-elect was working too late to stay home. My friends were cartoons with justified violence, movies about white dudes with female sidekicks, sitcom moms and hard sci-fi. And I wondered how many white kids had heroes that were black guys. I mean, not just want to hang out with them because they were cool. Bring them home with you. Your friends, your family. Deal with what they deal with. I found that most folks, they don't like it. One time, we ain't trying to run from one time. Do you get tired when you run through my mind? One time, you just gotta trust me one time. I'm trying to harry at the heart so we can open one mind. One time, we ain't trying to run from one time. Do you get tired when you run through my mind? One time, you really gotta trust me one time. I'm trying to harry at the heart so we can open one mind. Back to the thing I said a minute ago. Woody King, white playwright. Does anybody know? He's important. I had to study him. Just like the Brady Bunch, my family felt that they were the same as us, and why not? Except for the maid, we could relate. I felt for Marsha when she caught that football to the face, but Jameer, Trayvon, Laquan, Freddie Gray, somehow I'm not feeling the reciprocate. The reciprocal? Bootstraps individuals, voice a man quicker than Motown fully ever could. And what do I expect if you refuse to connect? If you jam at the jam, but our eyes never met. If you've never been to my house, even the fictional, to find a point of tangency to stick with y'all. That's as far as we get if you don't follow me. The middle ground between enemy and equality. It gotta be rocket surgery. So, down here in the most secure part, we have physical manifestation of these words in specific fonts. Miscegenation is in papyrus because, of course, it is. Misappropriator. It's another way of trying to keep these words in check. When we don't have rhythm and it's just a visual, we need the rhythm of the way things are drawn. This brings us to clickbait. Probably the newest word in the museum. It was coined in 2006, in December, by this cat, Jay Geiger. He was trying to do a bit of a social experiment with his blog. And it reached really high heights because it came second to market. First to market is always a failure. Second to market picks up the slack and becomes the household name. So, clickbait is the criticism of the oft imperceptible difference between advertisement and real news. Always been a problem, right? If it bleeds, it leads. Yellow journalism, which, by the way, isn't a racial thing. It comes from this weird cartoon. That's a whole thing. We're not even going to talk about it. It only lived for a few years and died in 2013 in the Upworthy eruption. Upworthy, you may remember, is that website that had outlandish titles that had nothing to do with their articles. Facebook and other social media sites really dug that because that meant people would click on things. It didn't have to be true or correct, feed them, or nourish them. Around the same time as the word entered the Oxford English Dictionary, Webster's, one of those dictionaries, like I said, real culprits. But it died around the time fake news became very popular. I know a lot of people think that former President Trump was responsible for the term fake news, but it actually was his opponent, Hillary Clinton, in 2016, she talked about the problems with fake news. After the election, President Trump was being interviewed by Jim Acosta, was asked a question he didn't like, and he answered, "You're fake news." And the already fragile relationship between people and the press had fallen apart. And people could no longer discern what was true, what was advertisement, and what was a story they just didn't want to hear. So, similar to some of the other words in the museum, everything became clickbait, so clickbait became nothing. Talk a little bit more about fake news. It actually comes from a different language. I have to apologize that once again we're talking about crappy old Nazi Germany. It comes from this term Lügenpresse, or lying press. It's what allowed the German people to not pay attention to the folks who were being kidnapped, detained, taken away from their families, and tortured. But it's deeper than that. You know, Nazi Germany got all of their cues from the United States. They learned a lot from Jim Crow and a lot from other presidents. I'm going to pull up the old quote book and pull this one out here. Sitting president and noted rapist Thomas Jefferson said in 1807, "The man who never looks into a newspaper is better informed than he who reads them, insomuch as he who knows nothing is nearer to the truth than he whose mind is filled with these falsehoods and errors." Thanks, presidents. That's how a word dies. So how about you? How has fake news affected your friends,
I ain't no slave to your rhythm.
your family, and your peers? How has being a slave to rhythms, including the algorithms, gotten you? Check it out. Twitter me this. How come every other person either giving me fits or giving me likes? This doesn't make sense. The rhythm of life never seemed to match up to the digital side. There were never two sides to any story. It's more like 40 times 40 to the power of 40 factorial. As humans, we crave the allegorical, and the numbers say the numbers have a bad habit of boring y'all. You know the code. You're number one or you're a zero. And when you try to color out the lines, then you're a weirdo. So big space, the lead's fake or clickbait. Twist fate. The beat gives grace or disdain. But if we recognize real, if we recognize real, if we recognize real, then we can weaponize real. If we recognize real, if we recognize real, if we recognize real, then we can weaponize real. I ain't no slave to your rhythm. 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 I ain't no slave. Alga, rhythm me this. Opinions turn to fact when we begin to remix. An outright thievery, praised as strategery, came for the scenery, stayed cause you agreed with me egregiously. And now I can't believe what I read. If it bleeds, it leads, and greed feeds the screed intravenously till the screed meets my need, and tributaries play into the stream. Play it on Steam? Only when it's favored on the screen. Like labels when they used to buy their own CDs. Who WikiLeaked this disease? That's a weak mystery. They call it viral cause it's killing the uniqueness in me. But if we recognize real, if we recognize real, if we recognize real, then we can weaponize real. If we recognize real, if we recognize real, if we recognize real, then we can weaponize real. I ain't no slave to your rhythm. 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 I ain't no slave. Consider the source. Is it a Trojan or a Hogan horse? A show of force? Or just to make you go, of course? There's no regrets and there is no remorse. This is the struggle. Curated by image and hustle. It's not gonna be nuanced or subtle. Blatantly fake news ain't new, but nowadays someone that hates you will make it true with celebrity clones. Backed by an army of drones. Young black gets snuffed out, shot on the phone. It's a crime, but only crooks learn the history books. But heads up, they're not as bad as they look. They stay shook. If we recognize real, if we recognize real, if we recognize real, then we can weaponize real. If we recognize real, if we recognize real, if we recognize real, then we can weaponize real. I ain't no slave to your rhythm. 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 Ha! This is what I've been looking for. What we've all been looking for. Last word, truth. Kind of casts a long shadow, doesn't it? Truth has its roots in tree. The upright steadiness of a tree, the reliability of a harvest, it allows people to trust. It's steadfast, resolute, inevitable, beautiful, trustworthy. It's why we tend to not trust people we don't think are beautiful, or people who are disabled. You know, trees are venerated not just because they're old. I mean, some of them are like thousands of years old, but it's that you can measure them mathematically in a way that's easily verified. The ver in verified, like verde, that's also tree. That's also truth. It's where you get verify and veracity, even very. The etymology of etymology, to throw a last bit of etymology to y'all, is the Greek etymon, which means true. In English, however, and actually most Indo-European languages, there's no primary verb for speak the truth as a contrast to tell a lie. Things started falling apart for the word when it became about who you believe rather than what you believe. When I was a kid, the police came to my school. I was like in first grade. It wasn't for an incident. It was to talk to the kids about things. And I came home and I talked to my mom. And she told me, or she asked me what the police were talking about. And I told them, they said to always stay safe, to stay away from strangers, and most important, above all, don't trust black people. And my mom said, well, what are you talking about? We're black. I'm black. And I was like, nah, we're more like caramel. And she said, well, what about your cousin Tammy? That's my cousin who's more dark-skinned, and she named me Brian after some boy she liked. And I said, well, yeah, I guess I trust her. And that allowed me to move on through. It's actually how I found out that I wasn't normal. In 2005, Stephen Colbert tried to rebrand truth as truthiness, something that feels true, even if it isn't true. The reality of it is when we made these things personal, about our feelings, we were in trouble as soon as we started calling it my truth. If it can be owned, it can't be shared. It can, however, be manipulated. And that is how a word dies. This is the last time I'll ever make a promise. I don't know another way to be honest. And if that's progress for me to make amends with my conscience, then brother, can I borrow some nonsense I come from a tribe? It's called leftist concept. Where death is just a step on your prom dress. The fabric tears, the whole grows like Tetsuo. Where my dogs and where the next Fujo? Man bites man tan, but every storyline got a bad man. But every lobbyist got a glad hand. Life unexamined. Knowledge never wins over passion. Free speech, microtransaction. Open your hearts up. I probably got the best Kickstarter. I guess I'd rather beg than barter. The manga martyr. When I was young, I wished I was darker. Now I wish I had the Willis and Dartha. It's not how much you get knocked down. It's how much you get back up. When they put you down, put your fists up. Some things we just won't put up, but when they let you down, that's when you cannot let up. When they shut you down, get back down now. You gotta show them that you won't shut up. MCs, get freestyles, no matter if they're the best. Just find a rhythm that's natural for your breath. DJs, spin the wax you feel and wheel up. Bring back the full, bring back the raw, uncut. Writers, get up on the walls when you need it. When you get buffed, trust that the right people have seen it. B-boys, remember, you're not dancing, you're screaming. Don't break, hit the break instead of grieving. You know I need it. I know you need it too. And when it comes from the heart, it's because it's what they seek in you. And when it all falls apart, that's when you lost any excuse. There ain't a universe where there's a universal truth. The secret is the alchemist to turn your gold to Cheetos. Nobody knows what Tony Rich, but being alone is lethal. Die on your feet instead of your knees in front of your people. And let them know who put the riot in Grio. It's not how much you get knocked down. It's how much you get back up. When they shut you down, put your fists up. Some things you just won't put up, and when they let you down, that's when you cannot let up. When they shut you down, get back down now. You gotta show them. Take 1 2 to 1 2, 3 4 to need 4, 5 6 to try this, and 7 8 to meditate. Now I'm sitting with my chin in my hand and up a statue like the thinking man by Rodin. You see, thought can be the enemy of action.
Frenemy, your rationalization for whatever didn't happen. The categorization that I need is of a madman who crashes into walls to get it cracking. Throw your hands up like Asada, Alana, Guana, Saga, my Vespucci's and Mulatta. You make it harder to spot us, make it harder to sponsor the failure that we foster. And if we're beatboxers, we don't need mantras. For some, the truth is found in the drum. If it beats, it can be beaten, overcome. Word to mortgage owners, face your foreclosure. It's never over. Keep your composure. It's not how much you get knocked down. It's how much you get back up. When they shut you down, put your fist up. Some things you just won't put up. But when they let you down, that's when you knock up. When they shut you down, get back down now. You gotta show them that you won't shut up.
So, people always ask me, well, what do we do with these words now? I'm not asking you to remove these from your lexicon or to not trust the users of these words. It's just important for us to remember that the ruination of these words allows us to forget specific things. I'll list them out. When we forget about hypocrite, we forget that we are fallible, inconsistent, and that a broken clock is right twice a day, so maybe listen anyway. Racism. That race is not real, but the hatred and discrimination comes from a real, measurable place that most people are addicted to and don't want to let go of. Miscegenation, that not only is race fake, but the purity of race as well, and most of those are being done to manipulate us. For normal, the most common, richest, or popular is not the default. With sexism, that a lot of the stuff that we've defined as roles, rules, and tendencies are mostly to sell us stuff or take things away from us. For slut, that sexuality doesn't have to be about dominance, anger, or shame, or blame. For evil, we aren't always in a fight. And even if we are, it doesn't mean that I'm right. Resources aren't that scarce, and your success doesn't have to equal my failure. For deserve, there are so many more factors involved in why we get what we get. Stories are fantasies, not guidebooks. For obvious, the golden rule is stupid, and curiosity is undervalued. For clickbait, the expectations are just a shortcut to and not a replacement for learning. And for truth, if you can't share your toys, nobody's ever gonna get you. And then you're alone. That's how a world dies. I want to thank y'all for joining this Museum of Dead Words. If you want to know more, see some more in-depth discussions about my research and what happened, you can check out museumofdeadwords.com. We also have a dead word bucket. If there are any words that you think that are dead or dying that you want to talk about, share those. My current favorite is the word success. Their explanation was metrics. I also did a collaboration with artists from around the world, so you can check out some visual representations at the museum too. The album is available for streaming and downloading everywhere, and we got a remix album coming out next year with cats like Willie Green and Sly Fifth Ave doing the beats. Thanks, y'all. Peace.